Uganda has made significant strides in regards to combating sexual and gender-based violence, especially in regards to women. Though this is the case, women still face substantial challenges in regards to access to justice, whether it be stigmatization, the lengthy legal processes, or even lack of knowledge about where to go in the case that these things happen to them. Even identifying that sexual and gender-based violence has occurred to them can be a trial in and of itself. Central to this battle against sexual and gender-based violence are the women's rights organizations. They have made significant strides over the years, and yet we still face a number of trials. So the question today is on the state of access to justice for sexual and gender-based violence survivors, as well as the role women's rights organizations can play in seeing this horrid activity to a stop. So with me today, I have a very illustrious panel that will be discussing this topic. I shall introduce them from my extreme left. Coming in on my extreme left, we have Miss Aloyo Omega. Omega is a feminist lawyer and the communications officer at FIDA Uganda. Good afternoon, Omega. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. Right next to her, we have Miss Nancy Catherine Ayot. Nancy is a lawyer, a writer, a feminist, and of course a women's rights activist. Welcome. Good afternoon, Nancy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us. And then right next to me, we have Miss Niwagaba. Anne who will be bringing a very special perspective to this conversation. That is the perspective of the average Ugandan woman. Is a business development manager at Sikia Studios, and we are very excited to have you here, the voice of the women.
I am excited to be here as well. Thank you very much.
Okay then, ladies, thank you for having us. We shall just jump straight into the conversation, and I'll start with you, Omega. You know, with your experience at FIDA, with your experience as a lawyer, with your experience as a woman, what do you believe are the most significant challenges sexual and gender-based violence survivors still face in access to justice today?
The challenges that survivors and victims face, you would need to know exactly what sexual and gender-based violence is. Yeah. So there is this temptation to just say SGBV, but then there are two components in SGBV. There is a sexual nature of it, and then there is the gender-based violence nature of it. So, simply put, SGBV is those acts that are perpetrated against a person's will simply because of gender norms. So, the will of a person is in question. So, if this act is sexual, if it is physical, it can be something as denial of access to a resource. It can constitute SGBV as long as a person's will is violated because of gender norms. And I'm a lawyer, so you have to start with the Constitution. It's so cliche, but in the Constitution, under Article, is it 33? It says that women have the right to, to have equal access to dignity, right? Dignity, it makes me happy that the Constitution would use a word like dignity. It sounds like a sentimental word, but every person has the right to dignity, to say that I am of myself, I have a will, you get, to have things like liberation. The same Constitution under Article 21 talks about having access to equality, being equal in all forms of it. So that's a great starting point when you're going to talk about sexual and gender-based violence, because you have to know what does the Constitution say. Because the Constitution is the perfect state that we should be at. When we open that book, it should be a reflection. It's not a book, okay, but because it is in a book, I say it's a book. When we open that law of the land, when we open it, it should be what we see in society. Yeah. So if the Constitution is saying that you have the right to live a dignified life, you have the right to be equal, to be free from discrimination, pain, suffering, all those things, and then you open the book of the world and there is sexual and gender-based violence, there is a discrepancy. So now that's how you know that there is a what? There is a problem. Just moving away from that and going to statistics, there was a national survey on violence against women, and that survey it should be 2020. It was saying that 2020, right? 2020-2021, it was saying that 45% of there is a 45% lifetime prevalence of violence among ever partnered women. So if you look at ever partnered women, the words there that got me were lifetime prevalence. Like this thing is happening at that rate. Then when you look at children, children before the age of 15 had reported sexual abuse, right? So think of yourself at 15, you must have been saying S2, you were just a young girl, your breasts had not yet even, you're just in that adolescence phase. But if half of children had reported that they had experienced sexual abuse, then you know that there is a challenge. So all this I say just to give us some background on what exactly is the state of affairs in this country. So now that we know that, what are the challenges that that affect survivors and victims when it comes to sexual and gender-based violence? There is one I've been pondering about. Of course, there are so many. There are legal challenges, there are health challenges. There is just, it's to use a lot of English, it's a multi-sectoral approach. Every time I say that word, I laugh because I say people love English so much. Multi-sectoral, multifactional. It's a problem that has a lot of causes and a lot of solutions and a lot of challenges. It is not something that we are going to say. It's not as easy as take off your jacket. It's a single action. When we say we are stopping SGBV, it is not a one size fits all. So to know again the challenges, you have to know how sexual and gender-based violence affects women in community. It is not the type of violation of your will that will affect you in one way. These children that we talked about, this 59%, when they experience it, they could get pregnant. When they get pregnant, they could drop out of school. When they drop out of school, they're going to stay in the abusive relationship that led them into that situation. Some children, some women, some minority groups, especially men that identify as gay. People don't like to talk about this, but I read sometime a report by Minority Africa, and they were saying people, they get HIV AIDS from rape, so they can't report because the law says, the law that is in place. But all of this again to say that sexual and gender-based violence affects the people that it affects. When it happens to you, it's not going to affect you. It happened, let's report to the police and get done. No, it is a problem that is going to affect different layers of your life. It is the type of problem that will even speak to the poverty rates in this country, because these 59% children, right? If some of them have experienced it, dropped out of school, gotten pregnant, they are not going to go to school because they're not going to school. They're not going to go to the university because they're not going to the university. They're not going to have the chance to be on this show, you get. So they will end up in an informal market that is not regulated. It's a very serious thing. I have someone that is very close to me that got pregnant at 14, and you can see the change in life. Why? Because it happened at that particular point. So it's a very serious thing. And when you look at the challenges again, so because it's a multi-sectoral problem, even the challenges are multi-sectoral challenges. So yesterday I went to the hospital. I wanted to do an HIV test. I go with my card. I'm blessed to have a card, which is also another question for another day, because everyone should have access to healthcare. Okay. So I go to the hospital and I say, I would like to do an HIV test, and they tell me you can't do an HIV test. Insurance doesn't cover it. And in my head I was thinking that doesn't make sense, because the government is saying that HIV tests are free, right? But I go to the hospital, that service provider tells me we don't do it, you need to go somewhere and pay for it. I go to a local laboratory, they tell me it's 15,000, some say it's 5,000, some say. I was lucky to have that money at the moment, but again, when you put that particular context of that situation in sexual and gender-based violence, for a person that has just been raped and needs access to paper, needs to know what is going on in my life at this particular point, then it's a very broad conversation. Again, things represent broader problems. If you go to a private healthcare provider, they're not going to care. So if you have fields like health not being supervised properly by the Ministry of Health, then that's a challenge. But that's to give you just one challenge that they face. There are other challenges. Of course, there are challenges with the police system that we currently have in place. And you go to a police, you know these stories, you go to the police, oh, this and this has happened. As FIDA Uganda, we did a study under one of our projects. It was called PISCA. It was funded by the generous support of the French embassy. So under that study, we did immediate state access, immediate response of state mechanisms to section gender-based violence. So when you experience section gender-based violence, what is the immediate state response, right? So we studied from when it happens, then you go to the police, then you will see the challenges. Access to justice, by the way, is not something that just happens that, okay, this is justice. No, it is a procedural process. Someone has been raped, they go to the police, they are telling them, okay, you go and look for your abuser. That is one of the things that we found in that study. It broke my heart that victims in Arua, that study was done in Arua, victims in Arua were being told by the police to go and bring their abusers. So if someone has overpowered me and violated me, what makes you think that I have the physical capacity, let alone the mental capacity, to go and apprehend them and bring them and report them? So there are those challenges. I remember the OCCID of Aivu police station, he gave us another one. He said that my office doesn't have a door, yet this is where people are supposed to what? To report. So if you read that statement on the face of it, it just sounds like his office doesn't have a door. It sounds like a man complaining for a door. But again, you go back to the nature of section gender-based violence cases. Anyone that has been raped does not want to sit in an office and narrate the ordeal without the right to what? To privacy. So these small challenges, some of them can be fixed by budgetary issues, some of them by capacity building, but not to speak so much on the topic, but the challenges, you have to look at them from an angle of that is wide. Is it health? Because this thing is not only affecting you. Is it health? Is it the legal system? Is it that there is a case backlog? If there is a case backlog, for example, I won't quote the exact statistic, it should be somewhere, but it was talking about how the conviction rates are low for section gender-based violence cases. You know how serious these cases are, but they had very low conviction rates. It was something, say, I'm just giving a broad figure of what it could look like 444 out of 2,000 and something cases. Does that even make half? No. But if you look at it, the issue is not at the judiciary. The issue is this side, access to justice, right? The issue is this side with documents like a police form 3. You go for the police form 3, they are making you pay for it. So how are you going to... So the issue is not this side, that conviction. The judge may not have a lot of power when you don't have evidence this side. So the challenge is, just to quickly wrap up, you have to look at it again from a multi-sectoral approach to say that this issue in society, how does it affect different people, right? Okay, if it affects their health, if it affects their livelihood, if it affects their well-being, if it affects their reproductive and health rights, which is also another conversation. When you're raped as a woman, it doesn't just affect small tenets of your life. It affects your reproductive health rights, which is something very serious. You could become a mother at 15, which is not a joke. You know the current state of economics in this country. For you to drop out of school and start to raise a child, or for you to have your urethra, blown apart into 1,000 bits. So just summarily put, those are some of the challenges that I can mention for now. But later on in the conversation, I'm sure I will share more. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Omega. When you speak of the police people in Aurora telling a lady, oh, go and bring your assaulter to me. I had a friend who actually had an incident where she was by her border guy, she was assaulted by him, and she was nearly assaulted by him, and she was just saved by a car passing by. And so she goes to the police station right as soon as it happens, because she's a lawyer, and they tell her, but you don't look assaulted. Yeah. You don't look assaulted. That has really stuck with me. So we see it every day. And maybe, sorry, just to interrupt you, when we speak about that, about police telling victims to go and look for their assaulters, there is such a thing as the sociological point of law.
that things are happening in society. It is not just paper and pen, it is the why, right?
Yes.
Let's look at the society. What is happening? So you go to the police station, the policeman himself, he doesn't have a door. If he doesn't have a door, he doesn't have fuel. You understand? So sometimes it's not to say that the police is maliciously doing it. Of course, there are those that will maliciously do it because, again, because of culture, because of societal norms, because someone will say, how could you be assaulted, right? Or things that we have had, she was wearing a short dress. I hate that. I really, it pisses me off so much when people say things like, oh, your breasts were showing, or your dress is completely short. How is that connected to my violation as a person? How do you shift the lens from the person that raped me to now actually start examining me? Let us examine hairstyle, let us examine dress. But that's besides the point. The point I'm trying to make is even within these justice systems, there are issues that can actually be solved, right? So an issue as small as fuel. If a police officer is constrained to the point of not having fuel to go and look for the perpetrator, it will become a game of now what do we do? Now can you get this person and you bring them? So you understand? One of our cases, because I work in communications at FIDA, I get to read some of the stories that come through from the field. They were handling the child and family protection unit in a certain area was under the mango tree, right? Because there was inadequate space. So how are you going to handle those cases? If you're talking about something like a survivor-centered approach, no? You're saying that let us look at the survivor. What are their wishes? How do we make sure that the well-being of the survivor, whether it is physically, emotionally, psychologically, we are considering this well-being of this person? How are you going to do that under a mango tree for an SGBV case? Yes.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. As usual, very, very insightful. And I would like to bring you into the conversation. Ameka has made a point of it being a multi-sexual dynamic in place in regards to SGBV. But then the question, I want to take you to society as an average woman. I know as women, the thing about it is that you grow up always pondering the possibility. Either it has happened to you and you've just maybe missed being raped by a car driving guy, or you are in public and you were lucky enough to push the person away, or something happened. But even though that doesn't happen, you're always pondering what will happen to you if you were raped. You're always pondering what will happen, where you would go, how you would do it. And so my question comes in regards to society. Does society make it easy for a lady or a girl who has faced sexual and gender-based violence to actually find safe space, from your churches to your family to your friends to the police station? Do they make it easy for you to be heard, to be seen, to be felt? Do they give significance to your voice?
Thank you very much. And my answer, a general answer to that is absolutely not. It's not easy at all when you are sexually abused or something along those lines. It's one of the most challenging things that can happen to any girl child or even male child for this case, because things have changed. To date, even the male child is being abused vis-a-vis at a certain time when it was predominantly the girl child, or not actually child, even the girl adult, if that word exists. So it can be very challenging. One, first of all, it's something that is regarded as embarrassing. If you have been raped, or if you came close to being raped, or any of the other scenarios that can be regarded to as sexual violence or gender-based violence, it's very embarrassing. So it's difficult to go to the police stations or to the churches, and why it is embarrassing is because people have not been empowered with knowledge. Our leaders have not been empowered with this knowledge. Our parents, our teachers in schools. So if I know I'm going to be embarrassed towards my teacher, who is ideally supposed to be my safe space, I might not even tell them. And it's also known that the many cases that are reported are actually few of those that actually happen. in society, it's usually when like a young girl gets pregnant, her mom or her aunties or her parents are going to force her to keep quiet because the mother thinks she's going to get embarrassed. Of my daughter got pregnant, how will the other women in the community look at me? Yet that's defilement. It could have even been a case of rape or any other dangerous cases. So yeah, it's not an easy thing at all. The police, like she was saying, has very many challenges. I'll use a scenario that is different from, that is aside sexual violence, but in regards to the police. So there is a time we were faced with a challenge of someone who was at the edge of committing suicide, like they literally wanted to jump off a top floor of the building. So when we called the police, the response from the police was that for us, we don't help those who want to kill themselves. But when they die, you can call us and we come and collect the body. Oh. So I know that's aside sexual violence, but if they can give such a response towards suicide, what response will I get when I go and tell them my uncle tried to, do A, B, C, and D? Yeah, so it's very challenging, and there are no safe spaces. There is no ample information regarding this issue, and in my opinion, some of the solutions go to the very bottom of the pyramid, to everyone in society. Parents, teachers, they need to be given this information. Religious leaders, because when religious leaders, if you go and tell them you were raped, they're going to say, sister, you were wearing a short skirt. Why were you moving at that time of the night? Why had you gone to the bar? Why were you, drinking alcohol? But whether it was right or wrong, that's a debate for another day. But it doesn't take away the fact that someone has been raped and they need help. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And when you speak of society's response to it all, I remember when I worked with ONET, one of the things that came up was that it was in Namuchumba, so a little girl, she was 9 years old, she had been defiled by her father over and over again, and her mother had a mental health issue. So there was really no support structure around her. And one of the things that came up was when one of her uncles reported the situation to the office at ONET. The family turned against him. He had to flee to a whole other district, and the mother kept on saying, imagine losing our son for a girl. He had been taken, he had been imprisoned, and they kept on saying, imagine losing our child. All the family members refused to take in this little girl. She was, to this day, she does not speak. She's the level of mental trauma. This was a 9-year-old, anally defiled by her father over and over. She got HIV, and still her family said, we can't lose our son for a girl. And these are things that are happening every day. But yes, Nancy, I'll bring you into the conversation right now regarding you're a lawyer, you're a women's rights activist. Taking all that into account, the legal frameworks in this country, from the laws, are the laws in place? Are the laws followed? Then the training. What do we need to do to get through to our judicial, our law service providers? What do we need to do to get to streamline that dynamic, to make it so that a woman can go to a police station and she's heard, and that case will be transmitted to the DBP, and that case will be transmitted to a court of law? What do we need to do?
Thank you so much for the question. I am so glad for the background from every speaker on the panel. My take is that some of the laws, for example, the Constitution, on certain levels are perfect. And I'm not saying that everything is how it's supposed to be, because, like Victor said, like the law reflects what the society wants in place, But one of the biggest challenges that has been in this country has been enacting laws that actually support the rights of women, especially the rights against sexual violence. Because from the very beginning, you know, when you sit in law school and they're talking about the history of, say, rights of women, say in a marital relationship or in any other pre-existing relationship, they cannot own property, they cannot, like, women are de-enfranchised from the very beginning, and we get some rights, we lose some. It's like every time there is some sort of progress, then another narrative takes root. I honestly believe that if the mindsets of people, if the advocacy that we are doing today was good enough, if the society had the right thinking cap, because of the advocacy that we do, everything would be fine. Because then a girl would go and report, and she wouldn't be profiled on whether or not she's a perfect victim. Because there is the whole idea of who a perfect victim is supposed to be. Like going to a police station, not every woman who is, say, raped, albeit raped brutally, will have bruises. You know that? Not every person who gets sexually assaulted has some scars to show for them. Not every person who has been beaten or any other manner of thing, because some people think that this is a conversation about the conduct of a person, and yet it's a conversation about the humanity of a person. That's why it's a human rights issue to begin with. So the whole idea that there are laws in place and that these laws will do what they have to do, it doesn't exactly work, because we have laws in place. We have the Domestic Violence Act. However, we have, say, renowned celebrities. For example, Daniela came out and said, I've been abused for years, what, and then her popular husband went on X and said, I knew everything that was going on even when she wanted to escape. That is not the point. It's not the story. I'll find another woman. And then people went and said, yes, please find another woman. You're a handsome guy. What? Your career is progressing. Leave women. All men can be accused. The man did not go and say, I did not abuse this woman. He said, I knew when she was going to escape. And no one has gone to apprehend him. No one has gone, because these are crimes against the state. Why isn't the police knocking at his door and saying, oh, I'll bet there is no complainant, but that is something that he should be questioned about. They should have invited him to the station to give some to answer some questions. Because, and then another story currently on Twitter is the lady whose 14-year-old was raped by her husband. Now the story shifted to how she has been trying to steal the Haji's property. And all those people are like, oh, bad women like this. My daughter was raped. Even if I was trying to steal property, sue me another day. You get. But the thing is, by the time you reach the police station, even the police came out to say, we have evidence that shows that this young girl was raped, and yet people kept bashing this woman. And I don't know if this is fact, but like right now she cannot even stay where she used to stay. Like there is no home for her because of these narratives that are going on. It's like people perpetuate the narrative so much that there is nowhere to report to begin with. I believe that in order for these laws to be implemented successfully, in order for the victims to be vindicated, we need to reshape the narrative, because there is an intentional retrogressive narrative against women's rights. It's like everyone thinks that a right, like a woman's right, should be subject to argument. Does she really deserve it? Was she a perfect victim? Where was she? Or even what type of life did she live? Well, even a thief can be raped. You could steal something and go out on the street and still get raped. The point is, someone mutilated your soul. This is not something as simple, like Victor said, it's so multifaceted. It's different, because this is someone who comes. I believe, as a person who works in mediation, we believe in conflict resolution. Don't take it to court yet. However, one of the issues that I don't think should be subject to mediation is sexual violence, because that one, there is no excuse. The matter is not whether, or it's not a conflict. That is not a conflict. in my opinion, in my view. It's not a conflict that needs to be litigated upon, or once we know for sure, which is the law, once we know for sure that this person has been, is guilty of the crime beyond a shadow of doubt, they should be put away from society, in my opinion. But right now, what we have is that we cannot move the perfect laws that we make, albeit so imperfectly, because some of them still say, because until recently in the IT world, they were saying that if someone committed what do they call it, the intimate pictures, if someone put out your intimate pictures, you'd be arrested because you're the one in the picture, and yet you're not the one who put your picture out there. And that is also a side of violence that is not talked about enough, because it's in every aspect of your life. From the time you move out on the street, it's like you cannot exist without the violence. And with the narratives that are going, with the retrogressive narratives that are going on right now, it's like they're trying to say that the abusers have an entitlement to these women's bodies that should first be the focus of conversation before their crime. And I think before we go into what the judiciary should be doing, or what the legal experts or what the police should be doing, that is the first part that should be addressed. Now, going forward into the legal sector, it's not perfect, of course, because we have people sit in the house. We have people sit in the house and actually commit the violence on camera, and nothing happens. Like, someone can go in and talk about a woman's skirt in the house and be like, oh, this lady, oh, you dress so indecently. What are men supposed to do to you? We've had this conversation in this country. So the person is threatening rape and abuse on live TV. He's a legislator. No one comes to caution them. The speaker doesn't say, point of order. Nothing happens because these are the people shaping our laws, and they're going to put their biases, their perceptions, and their misogyny into the laws that are supposed to protect victims, and that doesn't work. It cannot work. It cannot work like that. But also, when you find in these laws, when they're litigating them, you find that the representation is not enough. The representation is not enough. When people have internalized when society has socialized people so much to take the side of their abusers, it cannot work, because you can have an overwhelming number of outspoken women, quote quote, and they'll be like, we must protect the family values. What are the family values? We must protect the family, because those are the family values that are going to reflect in our laws. They're going to reflect in our policies, and it needs a whole other training. And even if we actively train people will come out and say, all these feminists are brainwashing women. They're taking things out of scope, and yet we have whole institutions dedicated to actually train rapists and women to accept that they should be raped or that they should be abused. We have churches, pastors that hold microphones that speak to this. Now, I'm not saying all churches, so don't come for me, but we have churches, we have cultural institutions who come and actually speak to this, and yet people who come to speak to the survivors, people who come to speak to people who are possible victims, are demonized every single day as people who are trying to demolish the order of society. It's a rotten order of society, mind you. But also now, when it comes to litigation, I don't think there is enough, or the law enforcement, I don't think there is enough training on survivor, or on how to approach survivor, and on gender sensitive approaches, how to talk to a victim, because sometimes they're not ready to speak, or sometimes it's confusing that the events overlap, that a person can tell a story of when this person may have started stalking them, and the timelines, and the person is rambling, and then that may come off as inconsistent as evidence that is damaged. At the end of the day, you need a lot of time with a victim. But also, I think maybe in every courtroom we need a survivor's desk. We need that, because you could be talking about something else. We could be talking about domestic violence, but half of the time, no, 80% of the time, where there is domestic violence, there is indeed sexual violence. There is sexual violence. It's almost a sure thing. And sometimes they don't even recognize it's a thing. So I think with the conversation going, I may think of something else, but I believe that there is so much that can be done. There is so much that can be done, but most of it would be a focus on narrative change and mindset change.
Narrative change and mindset, that is a hefty order. That is, I can imagine the work is really cut out. But the women's rights organizations, which we're shifting the conversation to right now, Omega, over the last years, organizations like FIDA, organizations like ONET have made significant strides in regards to combating SGBV in Uganda. Now the question arises about their place in this order.
I love this conversation so much. I know where you're going with it, and I'm excited.
No, take it from there.
No, please finish. I suspect, but
just so that she's sure.
Yeah.
I actually wanted you to I actually want this conversation to be a bit different. I want to get an unfiltered perspective of the women's rights organization about their place in this order, about whether or not it is being, first, one of the things I would want to hear about is whether or not it is being honored, whether or not they're actually progressing, but then also the dynamic between the actual organizations in place, but then the government, all the individuals, all the, how should I put this, stakeholders in place. But then also there is something that you wanted to say, which I would like to hear.
Please. What I wanted to say, so when we come to the women's rights movement, the women's rights movement has a constituency. We are there to serve vulnerable people, children, anyone whose rights have been violated. And the reason I said I'm so excited about this is because there is something I've been pondering about for so long, for the whole of this past year. I've been thinking in my head, we are NGOs, we do this work. Every day you have FIDA Uganda, you on it, field teams collecting data, presenting it to government, saying that this is the current state of things, these are the number of kids that have been arrested, women that have been arrested, minority groups. You're doing all this, but your data is not legally what? Recognized. So it does not make it into the what?
System.
Yes, there is a system that actually captures information.
Wait, what do you mean it's not legally recognized?
Let me give you an example. If as FIDA Uganda we record these and these number of cases, right? Those cases, let me say the police annual crimes report puts out figures at the end of every year, or whatever NGO it is. It could be SEHAD, it could be MEMPRO, it could be Reach a Hand, it could be Women's Pro Bono Initiative. They have their data on special what? Thematic areas that they focus on. My point is this data must be captured to represent the true state of things. Now how will that data be captured if there are no systems in place? If there are databases already, I know there are some databases, that's why you ask. There are some databases, but there is no smooth centralization of things to say that at the end of every quarter, NGOs report to government. We report to donors, which is very ironic to me. You're reporting to the Royal Danish Embassy, you're reporting to all these different people, but you should have some sort of government report that between the period of this to this is the number of cases that we have handled, and with that should come line ministries involved. For example, if it is a case of sexual and gender-based violence, can you get a special department to which all this information is what? Taken to, right? Because where there is no legitimacy of information, that information cannot be used, and cannot be used to reflect the correct state of affairs. But minus that, again, still on the question of women's rights organizations, I saw people were talking about the coffee bill scandal, rationalization and all these things. And I was really so happy, because in my head I was thinking, this is how you should feel about every bill that comes. When the marriage bill comes and it's a women's rights issues, you should also be that angry that they're taking away, I don't know, someone said they're taking away the coffee from the Uganda. Just this country is a very humorous place. Every day it is something. But the reason I bring the coffee conversation is because, very, very seriously now, we must think about how legislation is done in our country. We have a parliament. We have... The parliament is composed, maybe for our viewers, the parliament is composed of people from different political groups, right? Yeah. You have people from the National Resistance Movement, from UPC, from FDC, from whatever, the independents are also there. When you read the rules of procedure for parliament, even the way that those parliamentarians sit is decided by the law. So NRM will sit this side, the ruling government will sit this side, and opposition will sit this side. The reason this is important is because you have to again ask yourself, what are those numbers? So if one particular party has 334 seats, right? And these people belong to one particular party, and then you have another party that has 72 seats, and those ones, and then you go back again to the same rules of procedure, and those rules of procedure saying that there is voice voting. You've had those things. The ayes have it, the nays don't have it. What is that? What is that? Is this I don't want to use the word choir because it will be disrespectful. You are in this parliament representing groups of people. You're representing Gulu, Amudate, Mbarara. It can't be that our legislative process and voting, and I know that there are other ways that people vote, but what I'm saying is that even with voting, it has to be, Ugandans must wake up to a certain sense of accountability, right? For the votes that their parliamentarians give, because the vote of the parliamentarian is not theirs to give. It is a vote. It is one person in parliament, but behind that person are like 700,000 people that put them there. There are those that voted you, then there are those that didn't vote you. But when you make it to parliament, you're representing what? Everyone. So you can't say that parliamentarians are going to just vote and say the ayes have it. No, it cannot be like that. These are issues of national importance. They affect real people, by the way. It sounds like a perfect conversation, but we need to move towards responsible legislation. That if we are voting, and let me say I'm Aloyo Nyeko Omega, I represent Gulu constituency, and I've said I must give a report as to why I have said what? Whether my report is saying that, okay, the marriage bill, this is what I think about the marriage bill. When I say in Gulu, these are the statistics only. That is how societies are shaped. Okay. And I don't want to be a prophetess of doom. But sadly, you will not win. Whether it is a coffee bill, whether it is a what, with the way I've described that situation of the numbers, because if it is voting by numbers, you're not going to win. You remember, what was it called, age limit, when people beat each other in parliament. Whether you beat each other, the letter of the law is the letter of the law, right? Yeah. If it says we are voting like this, and this particular group has the numbers, you are not going to be successful until you sit back and say, but why aren't these bills, right, working? And as the women's rights movement, that is an issue that we continuously face. You have the marriage bill. It is criminalizing things like marital rape. Seriously. And this bill is not passing. So you have to ask yourself, why isn't this bill? At what point? Again, it goes back to the question of legitimacy. Is our data being properly captured? Before a bill is passed, they do consultative processes, right? They will call NGOs, they will call different people that the bill could potentially affect to hear their opinions. I am a deep believer in legitimizing things. That process is not a voluntary process. It is not it is something that must even be considered when the bill is now before the what? The parliamentarians. And they are now voting and they say, you know what, when we did our consultations, FIDA Uganda said this, UONIT said this, MEMPRAO said this, right? Why did they say that? Because when you go back to those consultative processes, now you're looking at the people who have the technical expertise to answer the question. Because a member of parliament may not be a women's rights activist and may not have all that knowledge and information. But during those consultative meetings, there are people who are dedicating, and when I say dedicating their time, to look at every clause of the bill to say that this word could potentially mean this and it could affect this person like this. So this information, the whole legislative process from consultation to when the bill is first read to when it is argued out, you must sort of get a microscope. You remember microscopes? And look. And one of the microscopes that I deeply believe in is to move towards an accountability form of legislation. To even say that you voted like this, great. Where is your report? It can be a 50-page report. It can be a 1-page report. It can just be you saying, I voted like this because I wanted. Then, to take the accountability further, put this information on the parliamentary website and say that the coffee amendment bill or whatever it is, forgive me if I quote it the wrong way, right? This is how our members of parliament voted. This member of parliament voted like this. Here is their rationale for voting like this. That is when you have what? Success. Again, still moving away from that. When we look at, again, the composition of parliament, minus the numbers, minus the politics, you have special interest groups. You have the UPDF, right? You have workers being represented. I said it once on this show. I said that it is about time that we have someone that is from the civil society, right?
Yeah.
In parliament. Because they serve a constituency too. They serve vulnerable people. Even moving away from just having them being there, by the time you can recognize that workers are a special interest group and they may need someone to air out their what? Their challenges, or to give their perspectives on things. Then the same should be done for women. I know that there are women's MPs and all of that, and all that is great. But to say that you need civil society with all the expertise it brings in regards to women's rights to sit there, because even let me ask you, how is a bill brought about in parliament? It is a member of parliament that brings it. So as civil society, you may have all these issues on your mind, and you're saying we need to change this, we need to change this. But if the gate is there and you're not the one supposed to table it, you will not table it. So the legislative process as it is, it needs some deep introspection, first of all, in as far as making sure that there is accountability for choices that are made. Because when I use the word choir, imagine you're in the August House, the very honorable August House. Aye, nay, aye, nay. You just need now a conductor. That is all that you remember, Catholics. That is all that is left to conduct the choir. But it is this process is so serious because whatever comes out of that house is going to affect whoever is in Gulu. Even the things that we talk about on SGBV, the Sexual Offences Bill, I can give an example, right? So it is a bill, you want to get different sexual offences and put them under what? One law. So that when you go before court, you're not looking for a crime in the penal code, in this. So sexual offences are scattered all over different different laws in the country. So you could have a sexual offence in the Domestic Violence Act, in the Prevention of Torture Act, in this act, in this act, in this act. So by the time you're reaching that phase of prosecution, you have to do a lot of work. But if you have a single sexual offences bill that someone can just open and say, this person has violated this and this and this rules, these laws in the sexual offences bill, that makes access to justice very easy for people that have experienced it. So, but just to answer you, what is the role of the women's rights movement? And I personally believe that role will come with a certain form of legitimization and legal representation by the government, whether it is in terms of our data, whether it is in terms of representation in parliament, but most especially whether it is in terms of a legislative process that recognizes each stage of legislative drafting, like a legislative process that encompasses from when it starts. Those consultative meetings, I wish you could attend them. People go and just sit, a huge big bulk. You have someone from from FIDA, and you're just sitting and you're saying, okay, the word education, what could it possibly mean? No, I don't think. No, that can't be what it is. This a third, what about the 2/3? And these people are making spirited arguments, and they come up with reports, and they submit their reports. And what is the end game has nothing to do with the report. If you read the final thing and you read the report that came out of this, you think you were dreaming. You were dreaming. Your report, the things that you say in your report, don't make it, or the bill just fizzles out somewhere. So that legislative process is it's a very crucial bit, because the parliament has constitutional power to make laws. And any law that is not, let me tell you, if there is a gap in the law somewhere, someone is going to feel it. The more vulnerable you are, the worse the pinch is. You feel it.
You know, speaking of the consultative process, last year I represented ONET at a joint marriage bill consultation with FIDA. It was a whole meeting, end of last year, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was a statement made regarding the record. It was a specific clause of the bill, and someone said, but the other members of parliament, referring to the male members of parliament, will not stand for this. It was regarding cohabitation. Of course it was regarding cohabitation, but they will not stand for this. And just like that, they said, maybe let us consider placing this at the back. Putting this on just shelving this for a moment so that we can push the bill and it can actually pass. And so I'm just thinking that in everything that happens, we must first, place the rights of women at a secondary level to please a certain demographic. We must justify why, as women, we need a place at the table, however minute it might be. And it was just utterly disheartening.
Let me just say something about that.
Briefly.
So, very, very briefly. So, when you use the word, won't stand for it. We must move away from this demigod, demigod mentality. I don't know how much MPs earn, but I hear from grapevine it could be around 25 million. 25 million is not little money. It is taxpayers' money. It is my money. It is your money. So whoever is in parliament and has a very big car and won't stand for it needs a serious reality check as to who actually put them in parliament and who they serve. So again, it goes back to the question of accountability. Do you understand that you're a member of parliament? You're in this parliament to represent a certain group of people, and with each decision that you make, you speak for these people. So if you speak amiss, if you speak out of turn, it's going to affect these people. Again, when there is accountability, it is very difficult to make certain decisions. If they bring a certain, in one of those consultative meetings, I remember one member of parliament, when he was talking about marital rape, and I know you've probably heard of this before, this member of parliament said that when a plane is taking off, and you've heard that thing is so famous and people know it a lot, that when the plane takes off, can you bring it back? And he was, in regards to marital rape, he was saying that when he has started the process with his wife, and the woman says, no, I withdraw my consent, I don't want this. He cannot go back. That is problematic. So now, if you tell a person that when you vote, you write that down, so that we put it on the website as your justification. And even when bills are before the August House, it is not just looking at a law in its entirety. It's not looking at a law in its entirety. It is by clause. The whole bill can't fail because of a clause. Start to look at the bills stage by stage. So, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Our time is really, really fast spent. See, we'll bring you straight into this conversation regarding economic empowerment of women. When you speak to the average woman, we can empower women legally, we can empower women socially, but once a woman is left out of the economic pool, what do you think how do you think that plays into her being a survivor of SGBV? And then how can we as society empower women economically, but then how can also the women's rights organizations empower women sustainably, economically, for them to be able to stand a chance? What does economic empowerment mean to standing a chance against SGBV?
Thank you for that question. I'll begin with a small story. It won't take long. But someone was telling me last time that in my village, I come from Agago, it's a town called Kalon. They said that older women, like in their 80s and 70s, are leaving their husbands to go and stay with their daughters or sons, because because of the things that the men did to them in their marriages. So they're saying, now that I have an out, I will go, I will leave. Now that there is somewhere for me to go, I will leave. And then they brought it up as a male loneliness pandemic.
Of course.
A male loneliness pandemic, that older men have no one to do this domestic work for them or the care work for them, because their old wives, who are equally, weak, cannot stay in these relationships to do this thing for them. I also brought it to the reality that 10 years back, that must have been when we were in high school, we had older sisters, the millennials, that were talking about, oh, I found a good husband, will get married, he should be rich, what. And well, the narrative is still there. People still want to get married to a man who's a provider, quote, quote. These days, more women are saying, I need to have my own money first, or I need to have a place to run to first. And this speaks to the realization that economic empowerment, or having your own money, or having somewhere to run to, gives you a stand in this. It means that someone is not going to treat you a specific way. However, it is not a guarantee. It is not a guarantee, because at the end of the day, we also understand. I think Omega can speak to the fact that a lot of women who are being abused in their homes will not leave.
Yeah.
They will not leave. They'll say, I will stay in my marriage. I will stay in my marriage. This is what I must endure, because they've been socialized that way. And I think it's about, I go back to my first point, you liberate somebody's mind first before you liberate them economically. Because at the end of the day, if somebody got assaulted on the street, say someone slapped someone's bum on the street, it is only 1 in 5 girls who go to the police station straight up. Or even 10 girls. Most people would just be like, how could he? They could get offended, they could react to the situation, but not many of them know that it's an indecent assault. Not many of them know that they can actually take this person as a perpetrator of what? Of sexual violence or harassment. And the thing is, if a person knows that I should not be able to stay in this situation, and that they are validated from the very beginning, then things will not work out. Because I also remember in our high school days, they told us stuff like, do not wear earpins, you will attract the boys. Don't wear earpins. What do earpins have to do with sexual attraction? Okay. I am not speaking to people's kinks or anything like that. But what are you doing telling a 12-year-old girl that she's going to attract a boy? Or haven't you heard of the narrative of confident girls who speak their minds being labeled as fast girls?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that one is fast. That one is fast. That just puts a target on a person's back. So I think it's a lot about liberating people's minds, and then we can go ahead to tell them that, when you have your own money, you can have a gate where you can let someone in or not, or you can record this person doing this to you and actually take them to court. And if money was needed, you could hire a good lawyer for this type of thing. So I believe that economic empowerment is a very big tool to liberating women from sexual violence, but it also gives us the power to speak out, because we know, as in classism, only the person who has a certain stance can actually say some things. Professor Sylvia Tamale can say sexual violence is bad. However, a woman who lives on her husband's income, somewhere in the rural area, where she has to serve the entire extended family food and get opinions on whether or not she can leave the house, will not say that I don't want to sleep in daddy's hut tonight. You get? Yeah.
Like, it's very interesting that you mentioned that someone who is experiencing violence would stay in such a situation, because I think I read a statistic that said that someone who has experienced gender-based violence, or domestic violence rather, it will likely be on the 7th attempt that they leave.
Yes.
That they will actually, finally cut ties completely. 7 times.
Yes, and you also know, just to add little, perpetrators don't always come off as perpetrators. Yeah. Sometimes they appeal to people's sympathy, and as women, we are very empathetic, and we want to understand people. And a woman, the husband will say hit her today and forcefully engage in intercourse, and then he'll be like, I am so sorry, you made me angry, what, but here is 100,000, go do your hair. And then she won't go and tell the girls that, yesterday I was assaulted. She might even have the bruises, but she'll just be like, oh, me and my husband got into an argument last night. That was not an argument. That was not an argument. But the thing is, perpetrators just get bolder. So she forgives this time. By the time she is leaving, which is close to the 7th time, he probably almost killed her. And some people don't make it to the 7th time. That's a sad bit.
Some people don't even make it to the 7th time.
Yeah.
Insane. So, and as we close the conversation, I bring this to you. As an average citizen, for you and I, just living it up in society, what do we ought to do to switch things up, to change the narrative, to change the dynamic that, survivors are facing, but then also potential. We're all potential survivors anyway. It's harrowing. You walk out of here and you take the wrong border. You walk out of here and you become part of a statistic. So what can we do?
Thank you very much. So after all is said and done, after these people attend their fancy consultative meetings, and there's usually a lot of food. After we sit at panels like these, camera, lights, action, those, technical words, policy, legislation, I believe at the end of the day, as individuals in society, regular people that are not necessarily in civil society or policy or legislation or government, as day-to-day people, we do have a big duty towards combating this vice of sexual violence and all the other associated vices. So one of my personal beliefs is that when there is information, there is impact. But again, we're supposed to be getting this information from these people. But
sorry, I know we are so out of time, but when you say we are supposed to be getting this information from these people, which goes back to the topic, the role of women's rights organizations, and I keep saying women's rights issues are not women's rights organizations issues. They are national issues. It's government issues. The ordinary Ugandan should hold the government accountable for sensitization. Because if you hold women's rights organizations, when people say FIDA, women's rights, you want it, women's rights. No, women and men live in this society, right? And we are governed by a government that we put in power. So, sorry to interrupt you. I know you were on a certain train of thought, but I always feel it's very important to fully know that women are equal citizens in this country, and that their matters are not simply NGO matters. They're issues of national importance. Whether it is SGBV, property rights, you have to look at the government as an institution that is there to serve you, not an institution that has delegated. Delegation. The minister has gone, he has delegated. We are not delegatees. So it is a national issue. Yes.
Okay, so let's just say these people involved.
All stakeholders.
But actually what I was going to say was, even though we are meant to receive this information from the designated institutions, again, as individuals, we can choose to empower ourselves. We are in an age and era whereby information is all over the place. Even by that smartphone that you have in your hands, you could learn so much. So it's our duty to give ourselves foundational information of all these things. Because there are instances where we stigmatize people, but from a place of ignorance. And, she might come and tell me, after lectures, that the lecturer was telling me A, B, C, and D. He, tried to touch my bum, and I might tell him, don't make it a big deal. He just touched you. It's just a bum.
Other people are being touched also.
But unknowingly and from a place of ignorance, I do not know that could build up to something very severe, something that could even be life-threatening. So I believe that as individuals, we should empower ourselves with as much knowledge. We should take on that role to find this knowledge and know, what is this, what does this mean. Up to date, there are very many people who don't know what sexual violence actually is. When you talk about sexual violence, people think of a girl in the bush, 5 men holding her, and then one of them is raping her, and then yet there are very many other dangerous things of the like. Then secondly, like I said earlier, our parents our teachers, we should teach our children from a very young age what some of these things are, so that they're able to sense them and know, this could lead to this. This is inappropriate. As a parent, make it easy for your children to come and tell you, teacher Sam was as if.
Yeah. And that's the way that, that's where the kids report.
As if. I know a very wonderful lady whose parenting style is, unless you are actually an uncle or an auntie, her children shouldn't call you auntie or uncle. Lately, everyone who is older than you is auntie and is uncle. You find a stranger with their child at the shopping mall, and you say hi, and the child is like, "Hi, auntie," but I'm not your auntie. So this parent's thought is, a child is going to think, because this person is uncle, I am safe with them. Because this person is auntie, I am safe with them. So unless you're actually an auntie or an uncle, an auntie and uncle I think is a sibling to either of the parents, then you are Mr. Asimwe, Mr. Niwagaba, Mr. whatever, because that way the child is going to know, okay, if this person is just Mr. Peter can't just tell me to go with him to a shop to buy a sweet and I just go, no, I am not safe with him. So some of these things, we can begin solving them from parenting styles, teaching styles, like I said, empowering ourselves with information, and then to the point of as potential survivors or even as potential victims. I do not agree with sexual violence at all. It's something very terrible, but I cannot rule out the fact that even as small as the extent is, people do have a contributing factor to some of these situations. No, hear me out. Let me complete. Okay. We do have a contributing factor, as wrong as it may be. Well, I've heard people say, don't tell the girl how to dress, rather tell the man not to rape, which I totally agree with. And at the end of the day, a raper is a raper. They will rape anyone, whether they are in long dress or, because we haven't seen mad women on the street that get raped. But I still, and it's a personal opinion, I'm not in any way saying it should be a standard. I still think, and I still realize the fact that sometimes as women we have a contributing factor, and we should learn to protect ourselves by setting certain boundaries. For example, maybe in some of these institutions, as a student at the university, if you realize a conversation between you and your lecturer is going beyond coursework, and read harder, put your energy here, and it's getting a little bit ish, it's your duty to pull out and not be a catalyst or not fuel it to a point where it's going to lead to some of these actions. I don't agree, Anne. I know we're out of time, and Danita sadly, and I could say maybe just why I don't agree in the little 1 minute that we have. I was about to finish. I respect that, but I can have a personal opinion, right? Yes, you can have a personal opinion, but you see, when you say contributing factor, when someone has been sexually violated, there is the abuser and there is a victim, right? If I wake up in the morning and I go to the road and I'm moving my own things, again, we go back to dignity. I'm a person, I'm complete. I have the right to dignity. I have the right to freedom from abuse, right? So, and this I don't say to say that your personal opinion doesn't matter, but again, the Constitution says that human rights are derogable. Sexual violence is a very serious thing. The first time I experienced it, I was 13 and I was walking on the road, and a man grabbed my breast. And when I said grab, it wasn't a brush. He literally squeezed my breast, and I was young and I was going home, and I never told anyone. So was there any contributing factor as to my dress? So again, where you put the lens matters. An act, a human right has been guaranteed by the law. The right to freedom from violence, to be equal, to be a person that has full dignity. And the Constitution even goes further ahead to say that women, you have equal dignity as men. So
there is no contributing factor, sadly. This one I stand, just a minute. There is no contributing factor, sadly. But it's something that it's not non-negotiable. It has, if a human, it's like the right to life, right? If you get a gun and you shoot a person, are you going to say there was a contributing factor, right? So why is it that when it comes to rights like the right to life, when a person has actually ended up dead, people say, no, whether you kill a person, it is bad, it is bad. Whether you rape a person, it is bad. You got yourself and actually raped a person, and the law says this, and you have to follow the law. So there is no contributing factor. Even when you say that the conversation around lecturers and students, you have to understand the power dynamics between a lecturer and a student. If you're in your 4th year, and you're about to graduate, there is a certain unequal power. If someone is talking to you, you weigh and you say, this guy actually may be the reason I stay 1 more year here. And if you come from a poor background like some of us, and you don't have that tuition for another year, you may just continue that conversation a little longer. Where it leads, God knows. So there is no contributing factor, sadly. And maybe again, we are out of time. Something I want to say is, I really like what you shared about parents talking to their children. Sex is something that is in African culture. It is not talked about. It is a taboo. When I was growing up, the only form of sexual education I received from my uncles was don't get pregnant. The rest was for me to figure out. For them, their sexual education was don't get pregnant. So when I was experiencing my first period, when my boobs were growing, all these things you leave a child to figure out. When boys are having wet dreams, when you're in secondary and you see a boy and you're shy, you don't know the reason. No one ever sits down with you to tell you that, okay, you're an adult, you may grow up, you may feel like this and this may happen. So let's not shy away from sex. Let us talk about it. That's why even when people grow up and are sexually violated, you have a certain you want to cover it. Why? Because this is a topic that has been covered ever since you were a little child. So that's my few cents on that, but there is no contributing factor. Man.
Could I just conclude?
Yeah.
Conclude, please.
Thank you very much, and I do respect your thought, being that you are actually the professional here. But I will still firmly stand on the fact that as people, we've got to protect ourselves. And yes, it doesn't mean you should expose yourself to danger simply because the law says something. There are some, of course, it's a case-by-case basis. The facts of incident A are definitely distinct from the facts of incident B. And well, I'll give a small example. One of the places where women get assaulted a lot, which is very sad, is in the nightlife. In the nightlife, a lot of those things happen. So as let me speak for myself. As Anne, I cannot put myself in a scenario where I'm going to party with strangers and then, drink myself stupid. If something happens to me at the end of the day, yes, those people should be handled.
To blame.
They should be blamed. They should be handled as the law suggests. But I should not put myself in that position. And I am not dismissing what you say, and I fully respect that you are the professionals here, and I am speaking.
Maybe what you want to say is a safety measure, a personal safety measure is what you want to phrase as a contributing factor. So you can say that because of the society that people live in, they may come up with personal safety measures, which you could be right, you could be wrong, I don't know, but I would prefer if you phrase this as a personal safety measure. Yes.
Thank you so much, ladies. Nancy, your closing remarks.
Yes, my last statement is the fact that most people are not assaulted by strangers.
Yeah.
They're assaulted or raped by people they know, and people they trust, people who are close to them. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a brilliant, riveting discussion. I love I wouldn't say clash of opinions, but I think this has really brought to the surface what we're actually witnessing in society today in regards to the discussions, the conversations surrounding SGBV, and I think that is pertinent to us realizing how we're going to go forward. So thank you for this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for hosting us.
Okay then, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of yet another show. Thank you so much for seeing us through to the very end. sexual and gender-based violence is something that each and every one of us, by virtue of the fact that we're human beings, stand the chance, either we have already experienced or we stand the chance of experiencing. But that should not be the reason that you take a stance against it. It should just be basic human empathy. It should just be basic human empathy that makes you hold your legislators to a standard, that makes you hold your law enforcement to a standard, that makes you hold yourself to a standard. So as we go forth from this discussion, I urge us all to have a bit of introspection and extrospection. Look at your society around you. What can you do to make it better? What can you do to make yourself better? In regards to this conversation, thank you so much. My name is Turiho Danita. We have had a really brilliant afternoon. Thank you.